All right. So Mark is asking, are the 7 churches of Revelation in active operation today?
I love this question. And so I have a little slide here. It might be a little intimidating at first, but it's kind of this, I call it my revelation grid. I put it together, help me see the big picture of Revelation, what's all going. And I believe everything lines up where a lot of the seventh seal matches up with, I believe, the seventh trumpet, I believe matches up with the seventh church. So really, let's say there's 7 time periods that the book of Revelation is telling us about, beginning with the new Christian church around 31 AD, from the death of Christ um, to the end of sort of that age where they just weren't quite being super persecuted. Then you go on to the next age where they're under the intense persecution by the Romans and and begins also with the Jews persecuting them. Then we go on to where the church begins to start compromising, like under the time of Constantine. You have a lot of corruptions. You this is where you see the move to Sunday worship, and paganism is coming back into the church. So now you have iconography and praying to statues and all these things coming into play. And again, I know a Catholic will say, I'm not praying to the statue, but um, you have these pagan practices coming into the church, and then baptism changes, and no longer is it baptism by immersion. It's now baptism by pagan sprinkling, and you just go down a list. So church is compromised, or starting to make compromises. Thinking is doing a good thing. Thinking this will make it easier for pagans to get into the church, but it makes it worse. And then by the time we get to the Church of Thyatira, this is the fourth church, starting around 8538. Now we're to the church now is so corrupted that the church is now the source of darkness in the world, and we enter the dark ages in Europe during this time, because knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge and truth and science and all these things is now being hampered, and what's truth is being decided by a few powerful people in their ivory towers, if that doesn't sound familiar, by the way. Then we go down to the Church of Sardis, where the Reformation is starting to kick up, and I shouldn't say new light. The old light is being rediscovered by people like Martin Luther, uh, and John Calvin, and you go down the list, like many of these great reformers rediscovering truth. And then the main church becomes the persecuting power against them and holding them back. Then we get to the Church of Philadelphia, where now this was a time of great revival, especially in the 1800s. The printing press allowed people to have access to the Bible, and there's just this flourishing of information, and now anybody can be a Bible scholar and see the truth for themselves. And the Millerite movement misinterpreting, uh, misunderstandings of scriptures, the people thinking Jesus is coming again, that contributed to the sense of revival. And then now we come to the last church. I believe this started around 1888, and this is the Church of Laodicea. The Church of Laodicea. Oh, yeah. So this church would be the final church, the last church. Uh, and its hallmark is it's lukewarm, right? God says I would rather that you be cold or hot, but you're neither. You're lukewarm, and I'm going to spit you out. So there is going to be approaching time of shaking, of separating God's true people from the people who have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof. And uh, so this is the last church. This is the church that we're in now. But if we could put the chart up one more time, I think it's also interesting that this sort of process, this the stages of the churches are also can be very much the stages of us as individuals. It could be the stages of us even as a denomination. Different denominations might go through this cycle where they're like a newborn Christian, they're like on fire for Jesus, doing great. And then they might get to the point where they're being persecuted. They're just so out there in people's faces, almost so excited, that then they encounter quickly much resistance, and Satan's going to throw a lot at them. And then they get to the point where they might give up, and then they start accepting corruption, hoping the pain will go away. and then they end up becoming totally compromised, totally corrupted, and they might become the persecutor eventually. They become cold-hearted, and then hopefully God will then give this church a second chance. Like, God might um, rekindle the fire in that person's heart. So maybe there'll be a reawakening, or they might just continue persecuting people. But a lot of Christians ultimately end up in the church of Laodicea. Ultimately, they're neither hot, they're neither cold, they're not on fire. They're not persecuting. They're just there going through the motions. So that's so I think in a sense these churches also are active on a daily basis in different people's lives as well.